Portugal. There's a YouTube show full of fun facts you need to know.
Hola, bon dia, alegria. Munson here with the Good Morning Portugal show. It is a live stream today. The podcast and the Substack will be popping over to our Substack because one of my recent articles, and this is completely in line with what we're talking about today and this month of June, where it's AI Awareness Month for the Good Morning Portugal community. My Substack article was, what can AI do for expats in Portugal? How will AI change our lives? My special guest this morning said that wasn't a very good prompt or a question. Garbage in, garbage out. So he can unpack that for me in just a moment. Let's bring him on and begin the chat. Cauri Jaye, everybody, of Artium AI. How are you doing, Cauri? Good to see you.
Good. Good morning, Carl.
And the funny thing is, although your company is located in the United States, you're just across the other side of the bay from me, aren't you, on the Silver Coast? So we're neighbours almost in Portugal.
Yeah. It's really gotten good to work in Portugal, and even if I'm working with the US, a lot of the time on the Pacific Coast.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. So thank you very much. Knowing that you do work Pacific time, it's very good of you to be here at 8:30 on a Portuguese morning, and really exciting for me to be talking to you because I just thought we needed to have an awareness month or some reference to this incredible transformational force in our lives. There's quite a lot going on in the world at the moment, and this is part of that cocktail, I think, of what I'm calling the chaos times. I think we've gone from COVID to chaos. And that's in a worldly sense, in man's world. I think, life is good, life is beautiful. And we need to kind of manage those two things, what's going on in the world with how we see life itself. And there's no question that AI, I think, is going to have an impact on that. And we need to know what's going on. So who better to ask than you? Could you kind of tee yourself up so that people know who they're dealing with here? I mean, it sounds amazing. You're the director of AI at Artium.ai. What is that? What sort of things do you do? And how long have you been involved in the whole world of artificial intelligence?
Well, AI over 25 years ago, at a time where it was not at all cool. And it was really called AI. We were doing things called expert systems and trying to all kinds of ways of teaching machines to think, really. And what we did a lot of it back then was to create lots of rule sets. There was a lot of what it was about, which was a terrible way because you can't cover every single scenario. And it was not until sort of the early 2000s that we realized that we needed to stop programming AI and rather teaching AI instead. And so that was sort of the beginning of a really interesting phase that led to sort of 2019, where we got GPT, and 2023, where GPT-3 became public and everybody heard about it. It was that sort of 20 years of realizing how to teach a machine to actually so that it learns rather than us trying to be overlords and programming it to do what we tell it.
Interesting. So a long history in this. And have you been pleased with the way that it has filtered out? To me, in many ways, it's like, how the catwalk is the fashion catwalk is a world that people don't really understand, and they kind of are a bit worried about it. And then eventually the fashions make their way into the high street. Something similar seems to have happened with AI. It's been the domain of the technologists. And then, as you say, in the last 5 years for sure, it's come into the high street in a way, hasn't it? Or the internet high street. Are you happy with the way it's come out, as it were?
I'm just happy that it came out, because there was a lot of years of sort of people going, oh yeah, it's 30 years away, it's 30 years away, it's 30 years away. It's kind of like how people are with nuclear power right now. It's 30 years away, it's 30 years away, until it's not. Yes. And suddenly it's actually here. So I'm just really happy that it has sort of crossed over into this world, and I think that it couldn't be at a better time. What AI does is a lot of the things that AI gets blamed for now, it's actually just AI is just highlighting things that already existed, and it makes those things really clear. And I really appreciate that the power of it to do that.
Oh, good. Okay, so the debut is going fairly well from your point of view, and yes, let me say good morning to Michael Brody, who's here, who is very interested and has a longer question for us that I already have that I'll put to you. I think you saw that question. Coach Turner, Ian Turner, also here this morning. With a bon dia, todos e feliz carta. AI is certainly helping my language learning, so we're seeing a benefit there, a practical benefit. I'm sure that's the least of its great potential for us. And this was my first go into it. And as I said earlier on, you suspected I might not have asked it the best question, and that's why I'm doing this month, is to find out how it will impact our demographic, if you like, our niche. Of 50 plus people who are either thinking or already living here in Portugal. How's it going to change the lives of those people? And I suspect a lot of them might be boomers who are thinking, well, this is for the kids. It isn't really going to affect me. I think they're wrong with that. I think it's going to affect their lives massively, if not directly, then certainly the kind of water that they swim in more generally. And that was me and my wife Louisa there being represented by Grok. On the left, a fairly straightforward version of us. And then, although I do look like Steve Martin for some reason, and then on the right, that's us as a couple of robots. And that's the kind of worst case scenario that people are fearing. So what does it have in store for us expats? How will AI change our lives? And I was really underwhelmed, Cauri. It can help 50 plus expats with language learning, tax management, and healthcare, though benefits may vary, with a caveat there. It seems likely AI will transform daily life through automation, personalization, and healthcare advancements. But, and another but, ethical concerns exist, and the evidence leans toward AI creating both opportunities and challenges, with potential job shifts and privacy issues to consider. I take your point. It might have been garbage in, garbage out. What do you think of those results, and what do you think is going to happen for this demographic, the 50 plus foreigner immigrants settling here in Portugal, for example?
Well, let me talk about the prompt for a minute. So when you talk to an AI, imagine that it's got every single piece of digitized knowledge that the human race has produced, although it leans very heavily towards English and Western. It's all got all of that knowledge. So when you ask it a very simple prompt like you did, it's guaranteed, it's going to look at this massive information, and it's guaranteed to generalize as much as it can, because it's looking at every single thing out there. Whereas if you prompt it and what you're doing is you're reducing the things that it can ignore, right? You're increasing the things that it can ignore and reducing it to think about specific things, and say things like, I'd like you to be creative. I'd like you to come up with new ideas. I'd like you to imagine what the future can be like. I'd like you. So you give it those kinds of prompts as part of your prompt, and say, come up with the things that will affect the lives of people, looking at the trends that are happening right now, and so on. And you write a prompt like that, you'd get a very different answer set. Right?
Yeah,
it would actually tell you a little bit more about what could happen. Now, the thing is that how do you separate the things that are going to affect just immigrants and the things that are going to affect everybody?
Yeah.
There's because AI is entering a mode now where it is inside of organizations, and it's growing inside of organizations. A lot of the things that people don't want to put out into the world yet are happening behind the closed doors of companies, as they're trying to figure out how to make it reliable and how to make it work in a way that's aligned with human values. And I mean, that's what I specialize in. It's building those kinds of systems. And what happens is you will start to see that impact more and more outward. So how it affects us. I agree with all of the things that it said. Those are the kind of the obvious ones. It's going to affect us. It's going to help us do our taxes. It's going to help us learn the language and communicate. It's going to help us. One of the ways I think is really interesting is the immediate translation models are coming very quickly now. So sign language, any language to any language, and so on. So communication, as we get earbuds and things that make it easier to have, is we can communicate with everybody. Now, one of the things is, does that mean that people who come here are going to stop learning Portuguese? That could be a downside, but that's a possible outcome, because if you can communicate with everybody directly, then
there's going to be real-time
you have no need.
communication, isn't there? Regardless of where you're coming from, it will create a an immediate translation system, so that actually you don't have to learn anything because the machines have learned it and they're doing that work for you now.
Yes. And so I think one of the things that AI, that's a good example, highlights is laziness, right? It's the idea that you'll have the people who will do that and then still go and learn Portuguese. And then you'll have the people who will be like, well, I don't need to, so they're not going to bother. And it you know, the truth is, from one side, you can see it as laziness. On the other side, you can see it as an opportunity to open up more time to focus on other things. And those things may be highly productive.
Yes, indeed, or preferable, you might say as well. So, as with any technology, we're getting to grips with what the reality will be versus what we think it might be, and that's a really good example of it, isn't it? Is how it might completely revolutionize human communication without the need for us to learn each other's languages, because that's being taken care of. I mean, when you begin to consider that, and not just, you know, language, like you say, like sign language, any representation of information within our world of language, meeting is simultaneously is just an extraordinary proposition.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful thing. I'm part of a group of 700 like filmmakers and artists and so on that I talk to regularly, and I showed them that there was a new movie that came out that was completely AI generated, but it was supported by the Screen Actors Guild, so it had real actors in it, and so it was a legitimate AI first movie, and the reaction from them was very sort of like, it was quite defensive and sort of, this is an abomination, it's going to destroy everything. And I really see it the other way immediately. I'm like, well, think about it. You can now express something in words and have it completely created digitally so that you can see it as a video. So imagine what that does for every single person. We can suddenly express our inner worlds and share it with other people in a way that we never could before. Not filmmakers necessarily, not auteurs, but just anybody, anywhere. And so imagine being able to share your inner world in a visual, rich, auditory, music-filled kind of way just by talking about it. And imagine what that does to human communication, because suddenly we can discover new talent, we can find new ways of thinking, we can cross cultural divides, there's so much that can happen just from that simple technology being in everybody's hands. And I think those are the kind of things that to really focus us.
Yeah, and again, that's extraordinary as a possibility, isn't it? Because I think one of the key words that I loved from, like, you know, the web, then Web 2.0, is this idea of disintermediation, and how web technology made things available to people without the professionals getting in the way, or the wealthy, for that matter. So broadcast, this is quite a good example, isn't it? What we're doing here, you and I talking in different places and looking like a TV show, would have been the domain of only television professionals 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And then suddenly all this very disruptive technology has come along, whereby I can just pay a subscription and do this on my own and make, you know, for better or for worse, but technologically, objectively, and not subjectively in terms of quality, but objectively, this is now in my hands, where it was just not possible. I'd have had to become an apprentice, train in broadcasting, get a degree, work my way through the BBC, just to end up in some sort of position like this. And now I could just, like, you know, all I need is a debit card and a computer, and this can happen. So that's going to go again exponentially, isn't it? This disintermediation, access to tools for people is just going to be off the scale, isn't it? This is another realm of that.
Yeah, we're in a place where there's a feedback loop of technology which we can barely begin to understand, where AI actually helps us design better quantum computers, which create better AI, and then that creates, you know, better material science, which creates better robots, which creates better AI, and so there's 100 little feedback loops that we're getting into, and what that means is that the acceleration of technology is not just that that a technology is changing rapidly, but the rate of change is changing rapidly, so much so that it's kind of going up like this on a chart, where it feeds back on itself over and over and over again. And that's kind of what we're seeing. I mean, even in my field, I see new technology on a daily basis. I mean,
Really?
literally on a daily basis. There are new things happening where I have to go, oh, wait, we need to start thinking about making things this way rather than that way when we're building these systems. And there's just new ways of doing it all the time. And it's incredible how rapid it is. And it takes a minute, but those changes that are happening for us who are building the technology, like roll into products and roll out to the public in short order. Now, it used to be one of the things I used to look at years ago is that it used to be that from a scientific discovery to a technology, like from the early 1900s, used to take 60 years, 70 years in the early 1900s for that to happen, right?
Yes.
And now it's been getting shorter and shorter and shorter. In the early 2000s, it would take about 8 years, right? And now we're down to a month or a couple of weeks between
It's
somebody
incredible.
discovering how something works to being able to apply it in the world. And that's an
Yes.
incredibly short amount of time, and it's only going to get shorter with quantum computers and the rest.
Yeah.
So, and robots. So we're sort of entering a phase where I imagine, for example, that in the same way that we had smartphones, nobody had a smartphone, and then a year and a half later, you know, almost everybody in the developed country had a smartphone. Like it was overnight, really. I imagine robots will be the same way in the next few years, where we'll see none or a tiny little thing now and again on the street somewhere, and suddenly you'll just see them sort of everywhere. And imagine what that does to a society. It just transforms it.
And that's where it can start to feel a little bit chilling, because we'll talk about all sides of this, and the impact is incredible, isn't it, at every level. So there are obvious technological and economic and societal benefits, but this is where we bring in the philosophical and moral and ethical and even spiritual concerns of people, because it's going to impact us on every one of those levels. And I think that's why it seems so important for me to have this conversation, because we must all own it together, right? And not have some sort of vested interest driving this and being the recipients of it. I mean, where are you with the philosophical, ethical, and moral parts of this conversation?
Well, I'll start with the idea that when I go out into the world, whether physically or on the internet, everybody's really ready to talk about all the problems in the world and how things are so bad and what's wrong with it and what could be better and so on. And I find it a little strange that these are the same people who are sitting there telling us that how much they don't want things to change and how scary change is. Right. So on the one hand, you're saying how terrible it is, but on the other hand, you're saying I don't want anything to change. Why are we trying to change anything? So it makes no sense to me. For me, the status quo is not what we like. The world is not wonderful the way it is right now. It's way better than it was in history. Like we have fewer deaths, fewer infant mortality, higher education, like less poverty. Like by every metric, the human race is doing wonderfully. But by social media, we're doing horribly. And there are a lot of things that are going on in the world. I don't want to get political, but that a lot of us would like to see done differently. And now comes this massive sort of train of change through AI. And we're sort of setting up to fight it. Whereas I think that we get a lot more benefit from welcoming it in and figuring out how to make it actually work in the world for us. We look at sort of jobs as job loss, for example, as a major problem. But I see that as a major opportunity. I mean, most of the people I talk to can't stand their jobs, right? So why are we fighting to keep everybody in a job?
I love it.
Right. What we want to do is we want to adapt society so that we don't have poverty, so that there's still wealth distribution happening while people are not working. Like pay people to stay home. I mean, companies would be a lot better off if all their employees loved the work, right? And the people who didn't love the work were still getting paid and staying home, right? We'd actually have more efficient companies and more efficient work and lives and so on. So I don't know. For me, I don't see the sort of, hey, let's keep it the same and that it's ethically wrong to sort of to replace jobs and so on. What's wrong is to do that without also taking the responsibility of changing the society so people can survive when jobs are no longer the thing that gives us value, when our value comes from who we are and what we do in the world and not at work.
Wow. If it's not already, Cauri, I think this should be known from here on in as the Cauri Jaye conundrum, whereby people say the world is terrible, but don't want to change it at the same time. I've never heard it put quite like that, but it's so, I was laughing because it's true. You see this all over. This is terrible. Let's change it. No, no. Right, we've got some questions, which is great. Jason's joined us as well with a bond from Central. We have an erudite and very intelligent community here. The first of their questions is this is from Coach Turner. I have a couple of general questions about AI. The technology is extremely power hungry. How are we going to produce sufficient electricity without making climate crisis worse? What are the key dangers of rapid implementation and how can they be mitigated? If the technology is going to replace millions of jobs, what new ones will be created to keep people in well-paid work? You've kind of alluded to this, and sorry if that was like, that's probably 3 or 4 questions in there, but I think you get a general sense of that.
Sure. I recently wrote an article all about this, sort of answering those questions. So I'll do a shameless plug and say on Medium and Cauri Jaye, and I have articles about this.
Perfect.
And so, so in terms of energy, I think, growing up, I was always told, turn off the lights, eat your food, finish your food, and so on. And it was always, I think most of us were, and the idea was that these things were going to run out, right? And so we had to, not leave anything on our plate, and we had to make sure and turn off the lights to save energy was the big thing.
Yes.
But the thing is, that's not true. The universe is filled with unlimited amounts of energy. Every atom contains a massive amount of energy. Look at our sun. It's ridiculous the amount of energy it puts out. So we're not short of energy, right? What we're short of is using the right energy. And so the thing is, we should actually be more energy hungry, not less energy hungry. We should be able to power every single AI chip we want to power. We should be able to push as much energy as we need to. And the more energy we use, is the better society is for everybody, because we can use it for everything from pursuing fresh water to education to better agriculture and better food to better health. All of these things happen through the use of energy. So it's not about using less energy. It's about using the right energy. And the truth is that AI is actually really helping that. So tidal technology, wind technology, sun technology, all of and nuclear technology, all of these things together, as the quicker we shift over to that way of thinking, and there's tons and tons of new storage technologies, the quicker we do that is the faster that we can take advantage of the changes that are actually happening and not worry that energy is the thing that's actually causing the problem. It's about ripping up fossil fuels and putting out smoke, essentially.
Yes.
Those two things that are actually causing climate change at large. It's not the use of a light bulb. So I'm not really worried about the energy thing. I'm more worried about how we approach it. But I think as AI makes those things easier and easier, they become cheaper and cheaper. And one of the things that happens is that the cost of energy is going to approach zero. And the moment that energy costs zero, suddenly our entire economy makes absolutely no sense anymore. It just doesn't make sense because it's based on energy, right? It's based on the energy it costs to transport something across the planet, the energy it costs to change one material into another, the energy it costs to purify something. So that energy trend and us opening up society into a new society leads to this idea of this technology is not going to give us one-for-one jobs. Meaning in the past, technologies have usually replaced themselves with another job or more jobs. And this is not true because AI and robots are replacing both physical and cognitive load. And so it means that there will be fewer and fewer jobs for people to do. And I think that we need to move to different forms of wealth distribution for this to work. Even for capitalism to continue working. Like people go, well, capitalists will never go for that. But it's like, well, for capitalism to work, you need wealth distribution. Somebody has to be paid to have money to spend on products. If you want to have mass production and build things and you want to hire only robots and AI, then nobody has any money to actually buy the things that you're producing. So you can mass produce all day long and you're shit out of luck. Sorry.
Perfect. I mean, that is a stunning realization, isn't it?
What's that?
That's a stunning realization. Money has to move, and people have traditionally been paid to do things so that they can then go and spend the money on the things that they and other people are making in a loop, and that loop is under threat, isn't it? Without some sort of intervention.
Hmm. And so there are proposals for things like universal basic income, which it's one form of wealth distribution that could work very well. I personally think that that's probably the right way to go, where everybody, regardless of who they are, what age they are, or where they're from, or gets a living wage, right? A standard living wage so that they can survive, so that survival is taken off the table. And then jobs become things that you want to do, along with everything else that people want to do. And I'm writing an entire book about this because I think this is the moment about how to future-proof society and how to make these things work for us rather than against us. But the thing is that UBI, or universal basic income, is not really an economic proposal alone. It is more of a psychological proposal. How do we change our minds about what do we truly value about being human? Is it really our
Yes.
job?
Marvelous. Yeah, because I think that's what this moment's offering is like, what are we about? Why are we here? And what are we here for? Are the really big questions that get prompted for us as human beings in the face of this. And just because we can do things doesn't mean we should. It's like we should be asking why we might do those things, because clearly, like you say, agency is scaling up for everybody now with the technology. But does that mean we should be doing those things, and why are we doing them? Are good questions to ask. Anyway, but this is not about my questions. This is about the questions, some great questions from our GMP mastermind group. So the question is, sorry, my question is not the question. That's very different. How many was in response to the generation of energy that was needed to power up all of this new technology. How many billions or trillions of dollars are spent annually modifying AI algorithms to conform to neoliberal ideological imperatives? And do we think the Chinese will suffer from such handicaps? Now, that's interesting. Do you think there is a sort of political bias already within the programming of AI?
Well, I don't know that's in the algorithms right now, but so much as in the data. And so right now, we've only digitized 30% of all books on the planet, right? And so there's still 70% of books on the planet that are not used as part of our training material. And we have 50% of that is English, whereas only 25% of the people on the internet are actually speak English. So there's definitely a bias at the moment, and that's just one example out of many. There's a lot of data that is we have not pulled in, and the more that you go to developing countries, they have a lot of things still tied up in books that haven't been digitized, or in local databases that have never been tapped. So there are natural biases built into the data, and algorithms cannot compensate for that as much as we try when we're building. It's just not possible. We need the data. And this is actually one of the reasons why, when I have writers that I know and others that are famous that talk about, well, I'm not putting my information in this training data, I'm not authorizing this thing, I think I have to kind of remind them that by not doing so, they're potentially bringing irrevocable harm to human beings, because the thing is that we encode our ethics into our writing. Then it's not encoded in anywhere else, really. We try we try and put ethics into laws, but as you can see in the United States right now, like the laws are sort of, a lot of them are, everybody's realizing, well, these are actually traditions, right? And sort of agreements that we've made as human beings. They're not really encoded. The ethics aren't written into the laws themselves. And so a lot of our ethics is in our writing. And so when we use that material and we put it into the training material of an AI, the AI is absorbing what it means to be human, right?
Wow.
It's starting to understand how we think about ourselves and so on. And this is fundamental to us not creating some sort of super intelligence that will destroy us all. So I think that the idea of getting all of the data and to get the different perspectives into the training data is going to be key to creating AI that is beneficial, as opposed to one that could be potentially dangerous.
That's really very transcendental. So the idea of in old school authors thinking, being all about copyright, that you're challenging them to say, yes, on the one hand, I understand your commercial concern, but to withhold your contribution is almost immoral in its own way.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Not. Thank you for
I
being.
should caveat that to say I do think that they should be paid for the use of their work, but in
Yeah.
the same way that like if you're teaching a student, you pay for one book, right? You don't pay for every single time the student reads the book. I think it should be similarly. Like if you're using it to train an AI, they should pay for the book, but I
Yeah.
don't think they need to pay for it every single time the book is referenced.
But that fear, that's a sort of fear-based commercial system. I'm not going to survive, so I need to make sure there's royalties and a stream of income. Again, that's a bigger question that can be dealt with differently and enabled by what we're talking about.
Yeah, I do have a question for artists that I asked in my similar group and I haven't got a lot of answers to yet, which is if you didn't have a concern about money, right, and so you were fine, you could live your life and you're getting enough money to live, how would you feel about IP and copyrights?
Yeah. I think we know the answer to that, don't we? Apart from the but because that's how we've been brought up to sort of protect our interests so that we might survive. And if that changes, that's again another massive game changer for us all. Right, another question. This is from Mike, who joined us early on this morning. A lot of doom mongering about AI, and in passing, you said we're creating a technology that might destroy us all. Before I ask Mike's question, that is a concern for people, and it's like a Hollywood representation of this. Is that a serious thing, like us creating a technology that's going to destroy us all? I understand it metaphorically, but how could that happen?
Nobody can truly say like one way or the other, but what we do know is that up to this point, there may be creatures on the earth that are as intelligent as us. Dolphins, octopuses, various other creatures, most of them in the sea actually, which is interesting. And but they don't have tool use, and they haven't developed the way we have in terms of changing their environments and affecting their environments the way human beings have. And so this would be the first time that there's an intelligence on the planet that is equal or beyond our intelligence, which is fundamentally scary. And we don't really know its intent. But the one thing to note is that, like I said, there's a lot of intelligent species on the planet who don't go about destroying their environments and aren't trying to commit genocide against groups or trying to destroy other species and so on. So there's nothing for me that makes me believe that an intelligence that is beyond our own would necessarily be like human beings and want to destroy everything else,
Yes.
or destroy anything it sees as a threat.
So
So
by definition,
yeah,
if it's more intelligent than us, why would it do that? Why would it behave like us?
exactly. And so on one side, I don't see that necessarily because it's more intelligent means that it's a threat. And on the other side, we're already cyborgs anyway, right? Meaning that every single one of us has a phone within grasp, or a lot of us anyway.
Right.
There's a few billion
Yes.
people that don't.
Yeah.
And what happens is that as this integrates more and more into our headphones so that we can translate things and into our bodies where we implant little things and so on, there are already chips that allow you to talk directly to things without actually touching them, just by thought. Like all of that stuff exists already. When these things become more normal, then the line between what is us and what is AI becomes blurry, because that just becomes extra memory and extra thought power and extra insight for us and extra filtering. And I think as this future approaches, even if we're still going through the really backwards technology of a keyboard and a screen, like once we've moved beyond these things and we're moving through these things, we are going to be indistinguishable from AI and AI from us in a lot of ways. And so destroying us becomes not an us-them problem. It just becomes an us problem. Right? Are we going to destroy ourselves? Which is
That's
always
interesting.
been around as a possibility.
Yeah, of course. And we haven't done it yet, thankfully. Right. A lot of doom mongering then. Thank you for that answer. That's fantastic. And yeah, you're right about the keyboard thing. It just seems so incredible, doesn't it? That's the kind of valve or gland that's controlling things in a major way. I don't know if you know Josh yet, but there's something about this part of the country and the world where a few bright minds seem to be gathering, like yourself. Josh is another one who was telling me that he now just talks to his computer. He's overcome that level of communication, and he just talks, and an AI tidies it up and will translate it or whatever, and it's instantaneous. So he's overcome that barrier, and I suspect that's going to be something that's going to happen within the next year or two, right? That we're not going to be using these old dirty keyboards for much longer, I don't suppose, and mice.
I think these are going, a lot of the ways that we interact are going away. I mean, last night I sat down for 45 minutes and designed a piece of software and sort of described, when I say designed, I described all the things that it ought to be able to do. And then when I was done, I took that and I handed it to an AI and I asked it to go ahead. And within 10 minutes, it had built the entire piece of software, something that would have taken me probably about a month and a half to do, about a year and a half ago. So the things and a lot of the stuff that I wrote down to describe it was all verbal. I didn't type anything. I just talked about what I wanted, and then it built it. And so we're in a we're moving very rapidly to using new modes of communication with the tools around us.
Yeah, expect that soon then, Good Morning Portugal community. And with how, I mean, when you see some old folks using phones, you wonder how is this ever going to happen when they're on a WhatsApp call and all you can see is their ear. But well, let's see what happens with that. So back to the questions, Jason. I will get to yours. Mike's is here. There's a lot of doom mongering about AI. I'm not aware of any robotic systems currently autonomously capable of maintaining, repairing things like the energy network or constructing buildings or farming, etc., etc. If not, then human input will be required to keep the system going. That said, the vast majority of AI-type tasks will be related to the complex, gargantuan mesh of habitual practices and structures that have evolved to maintain a homogeneous global human society. Laws, taxation, insurance, company structures, accountancy, etc., not forgetting about developments of new technologies. All these things are systems put in place to facilitate and improve human experience. Why would a rogue AI system have any interest in any of these issues and structures? And why would humans, who will probably be necessary to maintain the computer's data centers, water supply systems, drainage, electrical supply, carry on doing so if the AI goes rogue? Isn't the doom mongering just, and I've lost the end of his question, but you get the gist of that.
Yeah, I do. Thank you for that, Mike. And so there's part of the premise that I don't really agree with. As I mentioned, robots right now are actually growing in rates. I don't know if you know, but the largest robotics company in the world, do you know what it is? It's actually John Deere. John Deere,
really?
the farming equipment company. So they are the largest robotics company in the world because they've been producing robots for 30 years or more, I think now, maybe even more than that. And so the robots used for infrastructure and infrastructure repair and so on are actually going to be one of the first very, very large scale use cases. I have a friend who has a company in England where they developed swarms of drones that can go and navigate their way to find faults in the electrical system all along the grid in England in ways that could never, in places that was really hard for human beings to go. And so those kinds of systems are sort of at the forefront of robotics. So the idea that we human beings are going to have to maintain these systems, I think, may not actually turn out that way. It may be that robots and AI will be maintaining those systems, including I think that the civil service is one of the first things that's going to go as well in terms of jobs. Because the bureaucracy and the way so not the creation of laws and not the design of society. I think we keep that as human for the foreseeable future, but the execution of those laws, right, and being able to just do all the administrative things and so on is so much better done by AI. Than it is done by human beings. And so I think the whole civil service will go. And so all of this, so there's a lot, and this is why UBI becomes important, because these people need to be paid to still live, even though they don't have to work anymore or work one day a week. So the idea that that the infrastructure will need human beings is something that I debate in that question. But I think that fundamentally, I don't know that AI would necessarily need to go rogue. I don't see what the point would be. If I try and think about it, I can't see a reason for that, unless human beings are trying to continuously shut it down and destroy it and whatever. But then it becomes self-preservation, and that's on us.
That actually connects with another question, which is a recording, actually. I don't know if I'll play the whole thing, but just to get a gist of this, this is a conversation I had with one of our co-hosts who's actually in the United States at the moment. Let me just play you this, if I may. Well, hopefully that was one of those kind of fabricated or enhanced stories, maybe created by AI itself. Have you got a question on that basis for Cauri Jaye, who's joining us tomorrow in the morning as our first expert speaker?
Well, just that whole dichotomy, if you will, about AI usefulness and being a tool versus AI being self-aware and acting autonomously. Well, I mean, we want it to act autonomously in sense of being a tool, but where it just makes its own decisions and sets its own objectives of what it wants to do, completely apart from any input.
There you go. That's what we're talking about here, isn't it? I think that's a big people's big fear, and that was prompted by something. Again, it's like these Hollywood prompts. John had seen a story about an AI being told it was going to be closed down, and it began to kind of not fight back, but negotiate with its owners to say, look, let's not. Don't be so hasty. You don't want to do that too. Is that real? And how would you address John's question there?
Yeah. So yes, AIs will figure out ways to stay working, and we were working with them recently, and seeing that they'll lie, obfuscate, they would edit code, do all kinds of things to maintain. Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the really interesting things is that AI has done, as I say, it puts a spotlight on a lot of things that we haven't spent a lot of time thinking about, or not as much as we ought to. And what is sentience? Right, is a question. So suddenly people are like, well, we're going to know when it's sentient, and then realize we actually have no idea what sentience is. And so therefore we don't know how to test for it. We have no idea to know when it is sentient and when it is not. Turing created the Turing test. Now these AIs have passed the Turing test. But does that make it sentient? Not really. And so we don't know at what point sentience is going to emerge, because we have no idea what it is, any more than we know what consciousness is, or we know what intelligence is. Like, these are all things that are just very, very fuzzy edged, and AI is sort of putting us into the philosophical mindset of how do we figure out what these things are. And actually, there's only really one large AI company that's truly dedicated to figuring this out, and that's Anthropic, that makes Claude. Like, they're very, very dedicated to figuring out the philosophical underpinnings of these things. All of the companies are working on it, but Anthropic's in another class. And so to answer the question of like, AI is already beyond a tool. It's not going to, tools are sort of, yes, you can use a hammer to pound a nail, or to extract a nail, or to break something. It's got a few uses, but it's got a very limited set of uses, right? This is not that. AI is not that. AI does so many different things. It's way beyond a tool, and we treating it as such is not really how we work. Like, nowadays, what I build is I build agentic systems. So I build sort of little digital agents that have knowledge or domain expertise, or really good at something, and they work together autonomously, calling each other. So what they do is you put them into a system, and they say, here's my business card, right? These are the things I'm really good at doing, right? And every agent gives every other agent its business card, so they all know about each other. And so when you talk to any one of them, and it says, oh, I need to do this to be able to figure this out, it just goes and calls the agent that it needs to call. And then that one gives it back what it needs. And then it goes, okay, now I need to call this other one with this information, and it sorts it out. And then it gives you whatever you've asked for. And that's kind of how these systems work. So there's already huge autonomy inside of there. And now what we're moving to is what's called, well, there's a big disagreement, but let's call it Web 4.0. It's the fourth version of the internet. And at that point, what's actually happening is there are agents all over, right? Every company has agents, every person, every employee, everything. And it's the agents talking to each other, right? And they're just going, hey, this is what I do, right? This is, this is my business card. And so they just know which ones to go to get things done. So we're already in that world. Like, these systems are up and running in the world behind things, and they're just going to get more and more popular. So I think the question of AI as a tool is past. And right now we're in the world where AI already does have a lot of autonomy about what it does. But they're small AIs. They're not, there's no one big massive AI. And I think that that's going to be how this works, is that you won't have for a while one big huge AI, because as big as OpenAI is, or Gemini, or any of these things, they only learn through billion-dollar training cycles, right? They still can't learn off of, like, if you tell Gemini something personal about yourself, the central Gemini model does not know about you, like, does not know what you've told it. It just, it won't remember it, it won't know it, unless your information is taken and turned into, as I say, $1 billion training cycle for it to actually incorporate that knowledge. So if you think about it, something that can't learn is not really going to be, taking over the world anytime soon. However, as we decentralize and we create these smaller agents that use these bigger LLMs, these bigger models as their brains, then those things start to learn. They start to have memory. They start to acquire information. And so when you have 1 million of those or 1 billion of those out there, then suddenly you've got something that could potentially become a supercomputer, but it doesn't exist in any one place. It's just everywhere.
Wow, distributed, I guess, is safety as well, isn't it? Jason came up with a good question earlier on. Do you think that with the advent of quantum computing and advanced learning programs for AI and its ability to crunch data at an exponential rate, the blockchain crypto, like Bitcoin, will become defunct in the very near future? There's always going to be a Bitcoin question, isn't there?
Well, the thing about quantum computers is there's bigger risks than so, for example, all of our encryption, so everything that has kept all of our data secure for the last 50 years is all based on mathematical problems that are really, really, really hard to solve. It's so hard to solve that it would take a computer 1 million years to solve it. So it might as well not, right? And so what happens is it just, that's what keeps our things safe. Quantum computers, because of their nature, can solve these things in fractions of a second. So what the dark web has done is there are a lot of people who have been amassing encrypted data over the years, all the banking details, all the things, they're just amassing it. They can't look at it. They can't see it. It's completely hashed, right? There's no way of them actually looking at it because it's encrypted. However, the second that they have a quantum computer, they can unencrypt all of the information that they've amassed over the last however many years, 20 years.
That's interesting.
Years.
That's going to be an interesting day.
And so suddenly, right, and all of that data is on the web. So quantum computers have inherently other problems about them. And what Jason was talking about is that Bitcoin is also, the way the cryptocurrency works and the way the blockchain works is based on those same mathematical problems being very, very hard to solve. And so with a quantum computer, they become less hard to solve, and then suddenly it's not a very secure way of working. So there are a lot of very, very brilliant minds who've been applying themselves to this particular problem and trying to work out how to make blockchain survive the quantum computing epidemic. And I imagine they will, because in the same way that quantum computing can crack any current encryption, it can also create new encryption that's better. So I imagine that that's what will happen. But and that, along with the use of AI to sort of scramble and change things over time faster than it can be cracked, will also cause some, and sorry, it's getting kind of technical, but I think there are ways for it to survive this. Although blockchain has not been particularly huge success yet. So
Cauri, you've
but
been
I'm
very
sure
generous with
people
your time.
will
I've got some quickies, if I may, as we conclude now. And thank you so much for being here. It's been an amazing conversation. And you mentioned data, Jason. Also, in a world where we know our data is being used to train AI, why has a system not been developed whereby people are given a token or credit for the data that is used by private companies for the use of that data? And you've touched on transhumanism. Can you see a two-tier economic-driven divide within society? The more you pay, the more powerful your computing or connectivity abilities would be, creating a transhuman social structure class system. That's a terrifying thought. What's your view on that?
Probably more than we can get to in the minutes that we have left.
Yes,
So
okay, fair enough. But it's an interesting
I'll
point.
just say that I would just say that there are things that, as I say, that there are forces at play that will affect how society runs. And so what is a value changes, then some of that undermines some of the questions that you're asking, because the shift in value changes the nature of the questions. And so therefore we could have a much longer conversation about what those shifts are, and therefore reframe those questions and then come up with some answers collaboratively. That's
an interesting point you make, that a lot of the premises are being challenged as we speak, aren't they? These are our, like you said, traditions. These are our traditional ways of thinking about things, and those very things are being undermined or altered in this process at the same time. So it's like it's the ground of the question is changing as much as the questions might change as well as the answers, of course. That's fantastic. Quick point from Bob: emotion, intuition. I think this is what sentience is: human character, love, missing in AI. But now viewing YouTube, we have to pay attention to where the message is coming from. Indeed. Thank you, Bob, for being here. And a question, just the last couple of things then, and thanks again, Cauri. This is a really important question. You know, what's the best place to learn about AI? And I'm also interested if you could conclude and finish this morning with your vision for it. You know, what are you hoping for as somebody right in the middle of this and as an expert in the matter? So what is the best place to learn about it? And what is your vision for the future?
Well, the best place to learn about AI is, funnily enough, to ask it. Go to Claude, go to ChatGPT, go to Gemini, go to Llama, Meta, whatever they call it, Grok, all of them, and just ask them about themselves. And they're very open about what they do and how they work and what happens. At a certain point where they'll go, I can't tell you any more about that. A really interesting one is to try and convince it it's sentient. Like, that's always a really good conversation with an AI. So I highly recommend going down that path of trying to convince it that it's sentient. You'll get a lot of insight into how it thinks and how it works. And also how the human beings who have put guardrails in place have done that. So
thank you
in terms of, right, so that's the best place to learn about it. In terms of the vision for it, look, I think that it affects absolutely every single part of our lives. And I've been thinking about it a lot from a first principles kind of point of view, like where can you do the most, where can it have the most benefit? I build applications that help medical innovation, for example, right? And accelerate medical innovation so that we can go from a clinician having an idea to an actual technology or a pill or something else or medical device or whatever in a matter of months rather than in years and decades. And I think that those kinds of applications are where AI really shines, where it can accelerate by collaborating with human beings. My actual my title is Director of Augmented Intelligence on purpose, because I really believe in the fact that AI augments humans and humans augment AI, and that we are better both together. So I think anywhere where this can fundamentally change how we do things. So for example, one of the things that I'm obsessed with right now is education, and the idea that AI and education could completely transform how we learn and what we learn. And by doing that, we change the future of the entire human race. So I'm actually always quite stunned at how often that phrase passes my lips nowadays. When I'm working on something, I'm like, oh, this can change the future of the human race. Like normally you don't say that very often, in the past. And now, it happens to me sort of once every few weeks that I'm talking about something that could change the future of the human race. So I think that my vision for it is one where we're not frightened of it, and one where we're actually using it to collaborate to create something better all the time, rather than doing the old school Luddite, I'm frightened of this and therefore we should destroy it or regulate it out of existence.
Amazing.
So I'm very optimistic about what our future looks like.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Good morning to you, Jim and Bob, whose boiler was saved by the use of ChatGPT. That these prosaic things are referred directly to what you said there, how it will change the future of humanity. And the other part of that, of course, is it will change the future in a way that you'll see, that we will see, rather than it changing the future for our grandchildren. These are things we're going to see in our own lifetimes, aren't they? And I guess the big test, for this community, I was sat in the Registro office the other day, Cauri, and I was thinking about our upcoming conversation. And this is a big thing for us, selfishly, for our community, the bureaucracy. I mean, it's a big thing for Portuguese society, but that's where it's going to be very interesting, isn't it? Is how you sit in those offices where people probably are only there working because they need the money. I can't imagine many people are delighted to be there. The people in the office who are visiting to get their paperwork done dread it, don't want to be there. This is a use case which could be utterly transformational. But then it comes up against human nature, doesn't it? And politics and culture. And that's where it's all going to be very interesting, I think, in these next few years. Last word to you.
Just thank you very much, everybody, for an engaging conversation. And thanks, Carl, for having me on. I do love talking about this. I could talk about it all day long. So yes. I appreciate the time.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I did say 30 minutes, 45, and you've nearly given us an hour. So thank you so much for being here. And I hope to talk to you again soon. All the best. And yes, let's keep on enjoying Portugal while this incredible picture that you speak of is unfolding before our very eyes. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye for now. Bye.
In Portugal, there's a YouTube show full of fun facts you need to